This is something that happened to my family when I was a little girl, back in the mid to late 1980s. When my dad retired from the Marine Corps in the late 70s, he took an engineering and consulting job with a major defense contractor in Salt Lake City, Utah. I have one older sister, my mom, my dad, and me. My sister and I were formally raised Catholic from a very early age, as I remember going to Mass as soon as I could read and write. Utah, as it is well known in the U.S., is basically central headquarters to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons. By the way, I do apologize in advance to any Mormon readers if I get some terminology wrong or anything like that. I've read some church publications for curiosity's sake, but that was a long time ago. My sister and I both went to the same elementary school while both of my parents worked during the day. I was a bit of a shy kid and kept to myself, but I always loved, as I still love, going outside for long periods of time. There was a family living next door to us that had a lot of children, though none of them went to our school. It's my understanding that large families are common among mainstream Mormons, and especially so in Utah. Our houses were divided by a wooden plank fence that had a few gaps here and there between them. I remember that if I wasn't careful, I'd get pretty nasty splinters from it. Sometimes the kids, 2 boys and a girl my age, would climb over the fence and play in our yard with my sister and me, but they never stuck around terribly long, despite having a blast. A lot of the time, I could hear their mother yell something at them when they came over. Then they'd have to go home. I didn't think anything of it at the time, because my mom would often yell for me to come inside, too. Every single time they'd hop the fence to come play, about an hour later, sometimes less, a woman would shout for them to get back home immediately. One day while they were over, my mom brought out a plate of apple slices and cheese as a snack. Sure enough, after we ate, we heard the woman yelling loudly for the kids to come back home right away, and so they did. I came inside not too long afterwards, eating dinner with my family later in the evening. While we were eating, there was an emphatic banging at the door. Father got up to see what was up and told my mother to keep my sister and I in our seats. Apparently, the kids are on some kind of restricted diet that we had no way of knowing about, and he was very angry when he learned that we had fed them without consulting him first. I don't remember the rest of the conversation exactly, but I do remember hearing my dad, a 6'7" ex-Marine originally from Brooklyn, saying fuck a whole awful lot, followed by the door being slammed shut. The dude huffed off. That was the only time I ever actually saw this guy. It didn't occur to me about 5 years ago why this would be so unusual and kind of fucked up. After that night, the kids weren't allowed to come over and play anymore. We'd say hi to each other through the gaps in the wooden fence. We would just talk as long as we could, since apparently they were now afraid of coming into our backyard again. All this over apples and cheese, I thought. And especially since at Sunday school they taught us about how Jesus wanted people to share with one another. We thought we were just being nice. Same as always, saggy-looking middle-aged woman would yell at them to get inside the house if they were seen talking to my sister and me. Sometimes they didn't even say goodbye, they just ran. I was too young to understand what was up, and when I told my parents about our little fence meetings, I think they were worried. Over time, there were more young children among them. I remember seeing them play outside with a couple of toddlers later on. Eventually, the style of their clothes would change from what you'd expect a young child of the neon decade to be wearing to low-key button shirts, blue jeans, and the girls only wore dresses from there on out. I had schoolmates with strict parents, sure, but none that strict. At the time, I thought maybe they were super-duper grounded for doing something bad, and that's why they couldn't come over anymore. Sure enough, every time they were seen hanging out near the fence, the woman would start yelling at them and they'd have to bolt. Sometimes, though, I swear, it would be a different middle-aged woman yelling for them to come inside every so often. This upset me, and I told my mom how sad I was for them, but looking back, I don't think there was even anything they could have done. The last time I saw any of those other kids was the girl my age waving to me through a gap in the fence to come over. She said that her family had to move, that they were all going to a ranch in a place called Arizona, and that they probably wouldn't be back. Of course it made me sad. Like this whole situation wasn't sad enough already, but being the good Girl Scout of my local troop, I offered to give her a friendship bracelet I had made, but she wouldn't take it. She couldn't even say why. But yet again, as soon as I mentioned it, a look of dread came over her face. Just then, 2 older women, one almost gorilla-like in stature and another thinner woman with blonde hair, both wearing pale and quilted-looking house dresses, shouted at her to get inside, quote, "Right this instant!" None of us ever saw the family again. My parents seemed strangely relieved. About a year later, though, one day my mom suddenly took to asking my sister and I really weird questions about them, like if we'd ever been over to their house, or if they offered to take us to their church services. I was only 8 or 9 by then and hated going to our own church. Why would I actually want to go to another one? My mom's persistence was worrying my dad, and one night the questions got particularly annoying, took her aside and said something like, "If they knew anything, don't you think they'd have told someone, or us by now? They're just little girls. They didn't know." After the last batch of stock market tumbles in '89, we left Utah for good. It wasn't until the YFZ ranch raid in 2008 that I even remembered this ever happening. I called my parents after a few days of reflection, and, well, they're quite a bit older and don't remember everything quite so clearly as they once did. Yep, our neighbors were very likely members of a fundamentalist sect of Mormon ideology. And yes, I know full well that the mainstream LDS church no longer officially practices polygamy. After thinking about the situation some more, and doing some light research on the origins and beliefs of the cult, the odds are good that their parents were followers of Warren Jeffs. Those poor kids didn't stand a chance in an environment like that. But at that age, I had no way of knowing. In 2011, I got an email from my mother who'd been casually chatting up our old Utah friends, the few relatively sane ones we had. And she told me that a girl who used to come over and play with us fairly regularly as a child had committed suicide a few weeks ago. Apparently, she was running away from her husband and had been for some time. When I pressed her for details, my mom outright refused, to this day, to tell me why she left him. Creepy cultist neighbors from Salt Lake City, let's never meet again. More for your sake than mine.